Good morning, grade 5, and happy Monday. We have another lesson today. Today, we're going to be talking about adding decimals. So, I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. Enjoyed some beautiful weather. Finally, starting to feel a little bit like summertime here in the Yukon. So, hopefully, everyone got outside and looking forward to another good week. And yeah, today we're going to be talking about adding decimals, which will kind of get into some of the stuff that we talked about before with place value, because it is important when we're adding decimals that we know our place values, make sure that we're aligning everything properly. And basically, as long as you're doing that, as long as you are lining everything up, remember where to put everything so your place values line up when you're adding vertically, then it's just like regular addition, multi-digit numbers. The regrouping's the same. So we'll get into that. We'll show a couple examples, and it's actually a pretty short lesson today, so shouldn't be too long. I think for a lot of you, just kind of going to be a review and something you kind of already know how to do. So hopefully that will be no trouble with our worksheet for today. So just talking about tenths and hundredths. And we talked about this in our last lesson, how they work just like the other place value, and that each value is 10 times the value to the right. So when we go to hundredths, there are 10 hundredths that make up a tenth, just like there are 10 tenths that then make up a 1. So it's the same kind of way. So that means that when we're adding, our regrouping works the exact same way. So if we add something starting on the right side, and we get to a point that our sum is greater than 10, we've got to make sure that we regroup and add that into our next place value column. So that is really just as long as you remember that, you can add decimals just the way you add regular numbers. So I wanted to put this up as an example. Have I written the addition correctly? And you see 351 plus 12. You notice too, this is in a grid. So if you have grid paper at home, sometimes it's helpful just to make sure that you're lining up your columns correctly, that you get your place values all lined up, because that will ensure that you do not make mistakes. So I look at this, and if I'm looking here, that's my tens, that's my ones, but in here I've got my hundreds, tens, and ones. So the answer to that question, did I write it correctly? No, I did not. That is written incorrectly because we do not have our place values all lined up. So realign the digits and perform the sum. So we'll start 351, 3, 5, and 1, hundreds, tens, and ones. Now though, when we're adding 12, we have nothing in the hundreds, so we leave that blank. We put a 1 and a 2, and now we can perform our addition. Now we're going to get the correct answer. If we did it this way up top, we're not going to get the correct answer. So it's important that we line those up, get the place values set up correctly so that we can get the right answer. So 1 plus 2 is 3, 5 plus 1 is 6, 3, this is blank. We treat that as a 0, so 3 plus 0 is 3. So our answer is 363. So just remember making sure that you line up those place value columns correctly. If you have grid paper at home, it can be helpful, but as long as you're careful and neat, you should have no problem even if you don't have grid paper. But the grid paper will just make it a little bit easier for some of you. All right, so now we have write the equation in vertical format as decimal. So vertical means going up and down, just like we did that last problem. And then, again, you notice down here it says add decimals the same way you add whole numbers. Line up the place values. That is important, but beyond lining up the place values, adding decimals is the same as adding whole numbers. So I've got 21 hundredths. So if I have that, I'll put a 0 here. I'm going to put my decimal right there, and then 21, and now I've got 14 tenths, and we haven't really gotten into mixed numbers. Some of you may be familiar with it from last year. But so 14 tenths means that I'm going to have 1 and I'm going to have 4 tenths. So 1.4. Now something when you're lining this up that you may want to do is put a 0 here, because that's not going to affect the value, and just so that this way you make sure that you have your place value lined up. So now I can do my addition. 1 plus 0, 1, 2 plus 4 is 6, and you know what, I'm looking at this problem here, and I looked at this, but I think that there might be a error here, because what I'm looking at is the numbers that they're giving here, 35 tenths. So I think we're just going to have to fix this a little bit, because I think really what it wants us to do is have this as hundredths. So I'm going to just kind of get rid of this, and I'm going to add a 0 here, 0 here. Sorry about that, but you know, just like in class, sometimes we have mistakes that come up on our lesson slides, and we fix it as we go along. So here we go. So 21 hundredths, there's that, and then 14 hundredths, so 0.14, and then 4 plus 1 is 5, 2 plus 1 is 3. Don't forget your decimal point, 0 plus 0 is 0, so 0.35 or 35 hundredths. Sorry about the confusion there. I was getting into something that we hadn't covered, so that would be the correct way. So we're only going to be dealing right now with the same denominators. So 21 hundredths plus 14 hundredths equals 35 hundredths. And I'll show you some more examples. So even though that one got a little messed up, should hopefully with these other examples just show you this. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so now we're just adding. And it just says, remember to align your place values. So here I have it all lined up already, but just if you're rewriting this at home, if you're doing work on your own on a separate sheet of paper, make sure that you line up your place values, make sure your decimals are lined up. And so if your decimals lined up, it should assure that your place values are lined up. Now here, in this first example, 0.35 plus 0.16, we're going to get into regrouping. So remember that our regrouping with decimals works just the same way, because we're dealing with, as we move to the left, that each number is 10 times what was to the right of it. So 5 plus 6 I know is going to be 11, but I'm only going to write my 1, and I'm going to regroup and put a 1 up here so I know to add that into my tenths. So 1 plus 3 plus 1 is 5. And important to make sure you put your decimal there. You can put the 0, so 0.51. And as you see, that's just like regular addition. Just make sure that in your answer you have your decimal. Make sure that you also are lining up your place values correctly. 8 plus 4 is 12, but I put my 2 here because remember, that's saying 12 hundredths, so that means it's going to be 1/10 and then 2 hundredths. So I put my 1 for my new tenth that I have up there. So 1 plus 7 is 8, 8 plus 1 is 9. Make sure you put your decimal, so 0.92 or 92 hundredths. And then finally for C, 7 plus 3 is 10. Make sure we regroup here. So 1 plus 6 is 7. 7 plus 2 is 9. Decimal, or 0. So 0.90, which you could say as the way it's written here would be 90 hundredths or 9/10. So those would be equivalent fractions. All right. So, as I said, mainly just kind of a review of adding multi-digit numbers and regrouping. Just making sure you have that decimal point in your final answer, making sure that you are lining up your place values correctly. Okay, and when using the standard algorithm, use the same structure as in the place value chart, aligning the place values. So again, this is kind of what I've been talking about all of this lesson. So just making sure that you're aligning your place values to make sure that you get the correct answer when you add that up. So you can see here I've got my decimals lined up, my tenths, and my hundredths. And I'll just take a look and show you what I was mentioning before about adding a zero. So when a digit is missing, regard it as a zero. And then we will check the addition. So if you have that as a zero, see 0 plus 5 would be 5, 7 plus 1 is 8. Here is our decimal, so 0.85. And if we do this out, 5, 8, decimal, 0. And if I treat this as a 0, even if I don't write it, 5, 8, decimal, and 0. Same answer. But sometimes it's just easier for people to actually put a 0 in there so that they realize that they are adding and making sure that they're also lining up the place values correctly. Because if one of those earlier examples where there was some digits missing shows how you could easily not align them if you don't have all the digits. So for some of you, it may be easier to add that 0. But if you notice, either way, you're going to get the same answer. All right, we just have one more page here. And so this just says add. Now this, you see, have been written horizontally. So it's not going, lining, stacking it up vertically like we normally do. So that means I'm going to need to rewrite it in order to do this. And this is where just, you want to make sure if you're rewriting, if you have something that's horizontal and you're going to put it vertically so that you can add it, make sure you're lining up your place value. So I have in example A here, I've got 0.38 plus 0.4. So there's my 0, my decimals are lined up, my tenths are lined up. Now this is blank, so remember we can treat that as a 0. I'll go ahead and write the 0 in there. It doesn't change the value of the number. So I've got 8 plus 0 is 8, 4 plus 3 is 7, my decimal, my 0, 0.78. Take a look at this one. I've got 0.37, so 0.37 plus 0.49. Now I've got that all lined up. My ones, my decimals lined up, my tenths are lined up, and my hundredths are lined up. So I know I can now proceed and go with my regular addition. So 7 plus 9 is going to be 16. So I'm going to just write my 6, put my 1 in my tenths column to remember to add it to this total. So 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. Then my decimal and my 0, 0.86. And finally, C. I'm just going to write that here. I've got 0.85 plus 0.1. I'll write a 0 in here, so I just remember. This way I can easily visually check to see that I've lined up my place values correctly. And I see my ones are lined up, my decimals lined up, my tenths, and my hundredths. So now I can go ahead, do my addition, and hopefully get the right answer. So 5 plus 0 is 5, 8 plus 1 is 9. Bring down, make sure I put my decimal. 0 plus 0 is 0. So our final answer is 0.95. That's actually the last slide. Like I said, it's actually, if you just remember to line up your place values, if you remember what to do with your regrouping, it is just like adding multi-digit numbers. Make sure that you put your decimal point in your answer. And if you have grid paper and you find that makes it easier, by all means, you can use that to make sure you line up everything correctly. Well, that's all for today. Hope that, again, everyone had a great weekend. I hope you have a great Monday and a wonderful week to come. It's supposed to be very beautiful this week with summer-like temperatures. So hopefully everyone's getting outside, getting some fresh air, and getting some exercise. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me or Madame Donald. And as always, we are available on Thursdays at 1 p.m. to answer your questions live. Okay, well, have a great day, everyone, and see you soon.